Need your own account anymore, my husband said, sliding a form across the kitchen table. I'll handle everything from now on. He said it the way you tell someone you were taking out the trash for them, like it was a favor. I was 63 years old. I had worked as a registered nurse for 31 years at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto. I had my own checking account at TD Bank since I was 22. I had contributed to my own RRSP, filed my own taxes, and once, when my husband was laid off for 8 months in 2004, I was the only thing standing between our family and real financial trouble. And now he was sliding a form across the table. The form was a joint account consolidation request. He had already filled in most of it. He just needed my signature. His name was Roland. We had been married for 38 years. I didn't sign it that day. I said I needed my reading glasses. He said they were on the counter. I said I was tired. He said it would only take a minute. I said I'd look at it tomorrow. He let it go, that time. I should tell you how we got to that kitchen table because it didn't start with a form. It never starts with something that obvious. Roland had retired 14 months earlier, in the spring. He'd been a project manager at a construction firm in Mississauga for most of his career. Good salary, company pension, the works. I had retired 6 months after him, partly because my knees were giving me trouble, and partly because I thought, well, maybe this is our time. 38 years of early mornings and packed lunches and ships passing in the night. Maybe now we'd finally have breakfast together. The first few months were fine. We drove out to Prince Edward County for a week. We had dinner with our daughter Noelle and her husband at their place in Oakville. Roland started playing golf 3 mornings a week with a group of men from his old office. Then something shifted. I noticed it first in small things. He started asking where I was going when I left the house. Not casually, not the way you'd ask a spouse you share a life with a kind of precision. Where exactly? How long? What do you need there? I went to Shoppers Drug Mart one afternoon to pick up a birthday card for my friend Vera. When I got home, he was sitting at the kitchen table with his arms crossed. You were gone 45 minutes, he said. There was a line, I said. For a birthday card. I put my purse down and went to make tea and told myself he was just adjusting. Retirement was hard for some men. They lost their structure. They needed time. I gave him time. I gave him time. I kept giving him time. I kept giving him time, right up until the time ran out. By October, he had started reviewing my bank statements. He didn't ask. I came home one afternoon from a walk along the waterfront and found him at the dining room table with my TD statements printed out. 3 months' worth, with certain transactions circled in blue pen. What's this $42 at the Indigo en Blanc? He asked. Books, I said. Which books? Roland, those are my retirement savings. That money comes from my pension and our finances should be combined, he said. It makes more sense. Less fees, better oversight. Better oversight. I still hear that phrase in my sleep sometimes. He had a spreadsheet. He showed it to me on his laptop, color-coded. Every category of household expense maps out, a column for allocated personal spending for each of us. His column had $400 a month. Mine had $80 a month, I said. That's for incidentals. Coffee, small gifts, that kind of thing. Everything else runs through the joint account. Roland, I have a pension from Ontario nurses. I have CPP and OAS coming in. That's my money, and I have mine, he said. We're a household. It should function like one. I want to be honest with you, because I think this is the part people don't understand unless they've lived it. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the laptop across the room. I stood there in my own dining room and felt something I can only describe as a kind of blurring. Like when you've been inside all day and you step outside and the light is too bright and you can't quite see the edges of things. I had been a charge nurse. I had managed entire wards. I had held the hands of people dying and comforted families in the worst moments of their lives and made decisions under pressure that most people will never have to make. And I couldn't figure out how to say no to my husband about my own bank account. That's what coercive control does. It doesn't announce itself. It just slowly, quietly, rearranges the furniture in your own mind until you can't remember where anything used to be. I did not sign the form, but I moved money. Not all of it. I wasn't that decisive yet. But I quietly transferred a portion of my savings into a GIC that Roland didn't know about, at a different branch, because a patient I'd had once, a woman who came in with bruised ribs and very careful eyes, had told me years ago, always have something they can't see. I had never forgotten that. Meanwhile, life in the house had its own strange weather. Roland was pleasant at dinner. He asked about Noel and the grandchildren. He watched hockey. He drove to his golf games 3 times a week, which I notice now cost more than $80 a month in green fees alone, but I didn't say anything. The asymmetry of it sat in my chest like a stone. I started being careful about what I said on the phone. Our landline, yes, we still had one, was in the front hallway, and he had a habit of appearing in doorways. I began calling Noel from my cell phone when I was out on my afternoon walks. Even then, I kept my voice low. I had started to understand, slowly and then all at once, that I was managing him the way you manage someone unpredictable. Not violent. Nothing you could point to in a police report. Just unpredictable. One evening, I came home from the library. I had started volunteering there twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, shelving books in the large print section, which I found unexpectedly peaceful. And he was waiting at the door. "The library closes at 8, he said. "It's 8:40. I had tea with one of the other volunteers after. Her name is Frances. She's 71 and her husband passed last year. You didn't mention you were staying. I didn't know I was going to. I'd appreciate a text next time. I was 63 years old. I had been a professional adult for 40 years. And I was being asked to text home when I stayed late at the library. I said, okay, and went upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my hands for a long time. That was the night I admitted to myself that something was very wrong. I called Noelle the next morning from the corner of Roncesvalles and Howard Park, walking in circles in the November cold. "Mum," she said, after I'd explained, "how long has this been going on?" "Since he retired, really. But it's gotten worse." There was a pause. I knew something was off at Thanksgiving. He kept answering for you. When we'd ask you a question, he'd jump in. I hadn't noticed that. Or maybe I had noticed and filed it away somewhere I couldn't reach. "I don't want to make this into something it isn't," I said. "Mum." Her voice was quiet and very steady, the way she gets when she's serious. She's a social worker in Oakville, 36 years old, 2 kids, the kind of person who knows exactly what language to use for things. What you're describing has a name. It's called financial abuse. It's a form of domestic abuse. Domestic abuse. I turned the phrase over in my mind, like something I'd found on the sidewalk, not quite sure if it belonged to me. "I'm not in danger," I said. "You don't have to be in physical danger for it to count," she said. "You know that." I did know that. I had known it professionally for 30 years and somehow managed not to apply it to my own life. "There's a shelter in your area," she said. "Actually, not a shelter exactly, a transition house. It's for women leaving situations like yours. They have a drop-in program. You don't have to commit to anything. You can just go and talk to someone." I wrote down the address on the back of a receipt from Sobeys. I put it in the small zipper pocket inside my coat, the one Roland never touched. I didn't go right away. I want to be honest about that too. I went back to my life for another 3 weeks. I made dinners and watched television and listened to Roland explain, twice, why I should sign the account form, and both times I found a reason to delay. My sister was coming to visit. I was looking into whether there might be tax implications. I needed to call our accountant. He accepted these reasons. For now, what I was actually doing in those 3 weeks was thinking and quietly preparing. I called my pension administrator at Ontario Nurses. I did it from the library, using my cell in the back corner near the periodicals. and I confirmed that pension payments can only be redirected with the account holder's written and signed authorization. Mine. Only mine. Roland could not change where my pension went without my signature. The administrator was a kind woman named, well, I'll just call her the woman on the phone, and she said gently, "Is there anything else I can help you with today?" And something in her voice told me she'd heard questions like mine before. I opened a new personal checking account at the Scotiabank branch on Roncesvalles on a Tuesday morning when Roland was at golf. I used my Ontario driver's license and my nursing pension statement. It took 22 minutes. The young man at the counter didn't ask a single question that made me feel small. I started moving money. Slowly, carefully. Nothing dramatic. Small transfers from my TD account to the new Scotiabank account, spread out over 10 days, amounts that would look like ordinary spending to a casual eye. I put my important documents, passport, SIN card, nursing credentials, the deed to our Muskoka property that had my name on it too, into a manila envelope and gave it to Frances at the library to hold for me. Frances had very calm eyes. When I explained briefly why I was asking, she said, "Of course. I'll put it with my important papers. No drama. Just yes." I finally went to the transition house on a Thursday afternoon in the second week of December, snow coming down in that quiet way it does, before it really means it. The woman I spoke with there, a coordinator about my daughter's age, with a very practical manner that I found enormously comforting, explained my options clearly and without any of the awkward delicacy people sometimes use when they're worried about upsetting you. She told me about a transitional housing unit they had available, a small apartment in a shared residence building not far from High Park. She told me about the legal aid clinic that operated out of their office on Fridays. She told me that what I was describing, the monitoring, the financial control, the account form, was a pattern she recognized well. "You're not overreacting," she said. I had been waiting, I realized, for someone to say exactly that. I chose a Thursday. Roland had a cardiology appointment. Nothing serious, just a routine follow-up he'd been having every 4 months since a minor heart irregularity in 2019. He was always gone at least 2 hours between the appointment and the Tim Hortons stop he made on the way home. He was a creature of habit. That was something I had always known about him. It just meant something different now. I packed one bag, a rolling carry-on, navy blue, that I had bought myself years ago for a nursing conference in Vancouver. I packed clothes, medication, my laptop, my phone charger, the small jewelry box with my mother's ring, and the photograph from our bookshelf. Just one. The one of Noelle at age 7, standing at the edge of Lake Huron with her arms spread wide, laughing at something off-camera. I did not pack anything that was his. I called a cab, not an app, a real cab company, because I didn't want a digital record tied to my email, and I waited for it at the end of the driveway, in the cold, with my one bag. Noelle met me at the transition house. She had driven up from Oakville without telling her husband where she was going until she was already in the car. When she saw me standing in the entrance with my navy bag, she put her arms around me for a long time and didn't say anything. That was enough. He called 51 times that evening, then 9 times the next morning. Then, when I didn't answer, he called Noelle, who told him calmly that I was safe, that I had made a decision, and that any further communication should go through a lawyer. He called Noelle 6 more times after that. She stopped answering. I stayed at the transitional house for 2 weeks, the time I needed, and no more. I connected with a family lawyer through the legal aid clinic, a woman who had clearly sat across from many kitchen tables worth of quietly accumulated injustice. She explained my rights under Ontario's Family Law Act with the same energy she might use to explain a grocery list. Matter of fact, no performance, just the facts I needed. I was entitled to an equalization of net family property. My pension was mine. The Muskoka property, which had both our names on it, would need to be negotiated. There was more paperwork ahead. There were difficult conversations. There were moments sitting in that small transitional apartment, looking out at the snow on the street, when I felt something I couldn't name. Not grief exactly, not relief exactly, something that lived between the two. 38 years. I had loved him. I think he had loved me once in the way that some people love, by holding on rather than letting be. I don't have a clean explanation for how someone becomes the person who slides a form across a table and calls it care. I've stopped trying to find one. What I know is this. I was 63 years old when I picked up that navy bag and walked to the end of my own driveway. I had a new bank account, a good lawyer, a daughter who drove 2 hours without hesitation, and a friend named Francis at the library who held my documents without asking unnecessary questions. I had everything I needed. The 51 calls went to voicemail, every single one. Some people ask me now if I regret waiting so long. I understand why they ask, but here's what I've learned, both as a nurse and as a woman who walked out of her own house with one bag. People leave when they're ready, not when they're told to, not when it looks obvious from the outside, when something inside them finally says, clearly, quietly, and without room for argument, not one more day. Mine said it on a Thursday in December, while snow fell on Roncesvalles Avenue. I picked up the bag. I walked out the door. And I did not look back. I think about the form a lot. That piece of paper, Roland, slid across the kitchen table like it was nothing, like signing away 31 years of financial independence was just a bit of household tidying. I think about how close I came to signing it. Not because I agreed with him, but because I was tired and confused, and somewhere along the way, I had started to believe that keeping the peace was the same thing as being okay. It wasn't. What Roland did wasn't dramatic. That's the part that's hardest to explain to people who haven't lived it. There was no shouting, no threats, just a slow, steady narrowing of my choices, my movements, my sense of what I was allowed to want. $80 a month for incidentals, a text when I stayed late at the library, questions about a birthday card for a friend. Taken individually, each one sounds almost reasonable. Together, they were a cage built one thin wire at a time. And the thing about that kind of cage is that you don't always see it until you're already inside it. I was a nurse for 31 years. I understood professionally what coercive control looked like. I had seen it in patients, had gently asked the right questions, had quietly written numbers on pieces of paper and pressed them into hands. And still, I stood in my own dining room, looking at a color-coded spreadsheet, and felt that strange blurring, that loss of edges. Because knowing something in your mind and knowing it in your body, in your own life, in your own kitchen, those are two entirely different things. What got me out wasn't a single moment of courage. It was something slower and more honest than that. It was paying attention. It was Noelle's voice on the phone, steady and clear, giving me a word for what was happening. It was the woman at the pension office whose tone told me she had answered this question before. It was Francis at the library who took my envelope and said, of course, without making me feel like a woman in crisis. It was every small, practical, intelligent step taken one at a time, each one building on the last. That's what I want people to understand. Getting out is not one decision. It's 100 small decisions, made carefully and quietly, over days and weeks. It requires you to think clearly when everything around you is designed to make you doubt yourself. It requires you to know your rights, your actual legal rights, not what someone tells you they are. It requires, more than anything, a willingness to act on what you know is true, even when acting on it is frightening. The 51 calls went to voicemail. I want to be honest, hearing the phone ring that many times, I felt things that weren't simple. 38 years is a long time. You don't walk away from that without carrying some of it with you. But I also felt something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt like myself again. That navy bag, that cab at the end of the driveway, that December snow coming down quiet on Roncesvalles. I earned all of it, not by being exceptional, by finally deciding that the life I had built, the independence I had worked for, the person I actually was, all of it was worth protecting. Even if the person I had to protect it from was someone I had once loved. It is never too late to know your own worth. and it is never too late to act like it.